Okay, so here we go into the second video concerning the book. Just to say that this video is part of a series of 6 videos concerning the meaning and purpose of life. So if you haven't watched the first one, I recommend you go back and find the first video and look at that before you watch this one. So, there's the cover of the book, available on Amazon. And there are 6 chapters in the book. And so we've talked in the previous video about the first chapter, which is the summary and overview of the entire book. So it's the longest video of this series of 6 videos. But this time, we're going to talk about the second chapter, which is we start getting into the details. And the book, consists of these 6 chapters. And so 1 is a summary, 2 and 3 are background information. So that's what we're into now. And then video 4 finally will get specific about meaning and purpose in life. So I hope you enjoy this video. Here we go. So in this chapter, in this video, this is an outline of what we're going to be talking about here. First we'll talk a bit more about levels of being, which we discussed in the first video. Then we'll talk about the development of life. How did life come to be? We'll also discuss the possibility of higher levels of being, including a creator, which is obviously a higher level of being. We'll look at the role that religion has played in the past in our development. And then we'll briefly look at life after death, or to put it more positively, life after life. So here we go again, talking about levels of being, which, as we know at this stage, consists of a mineral level, which has physical composition. So a diamond is an orderly structure of atoms. And even when we look at the background to these slides, which are these wonderful photographs taken by the James Webb Space Telescope, we're pretty much looking at the mineral level, the beautiful physical composition of the universe. And so that's great. But the next level is the vegetable level, which has this added power known as life. And of course, we don't know what life is. There was an attempt to create life in the 1950s, and I'll be reading you a quote regarding that failed experiment. So life is pretty amazing. We have no idea what it is. We know when it is present, and we know when it is not present. And if we're gardeners, we plant a seed in the ground, and what do you know? If the conditions are right, the seed bursts into life. We have nothing to do with that other than plunking a seed in the ground. It's not like we've created life. And we've just created the conditions that allow the life force to appear and do its magic. So life is amazing. And it's a significant addition to the mineral level. Then we have the animal level, which besides having composition and life, it also has sense perception and consciousness, which is pretty amazing. Think of your pet. It's just a wonderful thing that they have consciousness. We have a lot of fun with animals because they have consciousness. And then finally we get to the human level, which also has, it has all the levels below, but then it also has free will. We can operate outside of the laws of nature. In the book, I give the example of honeybees. They always make their honeycombs in the shape of a hexagon. I think it's a hexagon. But they don't come up with bright ideas and experiment and come up with other ways of making a honeycomb. They're hardwired. They're absolutely going to make their honeycombs the same way because they don't have free will. They're just hardwired to the laws of nature. And then we talk about abstract thought, which is a pretty amazing thing. You know, you think of the great mathematicians like Euler. He wasn't doing anything but thinking and coming up with these abstract ideas about mathematics that turned out to be very, very useful. So abstract thought is something we should not take for granted. It's a wonderful capability that the human level has. So now we can represent that in a table for those of you that are more visually oriented. So we see in this table that the mineral level has this one special power, which is composition, to be made up of atoms in an orderly way, which is pretty good. And so it gets 1 tick mark. The vegetable level gets 2 tick marks, animal level gets 3 tick marks, and the human level has composition, life, consciousness, and abstract thought. So we're still elaborating on the idea of levels of being, and the human level has this unique capacity to operate outside the laws of nature, which we've wreaked a lot of havoc on the natural world because we don't have to. We're not a slave to the processes that allow nature to act in such a sustainable way. So all levels except us, are hardwired to the laws of nature. However, when we look at, the factors that separate the levels, life, consciousness, and abstract thought, we have no idea how to create them or even what they are. They've never been found under a microscope. So we need some humility there and appreciation of what we're looking at when we look at all of these things, this composition, life, consciousness, and abstract thought. So Bill Bryson has something to say about an attempt in the 1950s that happened at a prominent university, an experiment to create a life, or at least create it to the extent that we can by planting a seed. But here we go. In 1953, Stanley Miller, a graduate student at the University of Chicago, took 2 flasks, one containing a little water to represent a primeval ocean, the other holding a mixture of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide gases to represent the Earth's early atmosphere. connected them with rubber tubes, and introduced some electric sparks as a stand-in for lightning. After a few days, the water in the flasks had turned green and yellow in a hearty broth of amino acids, fatty acids, sugars, and other organic compounds. Then we have a quote from his supervisor. "If God didn't do it this way," observed Miller's delighted supervisor, the Nobel laureate Harold Urey, "he missed a good bet." Press reports of the time made it sound as if about all that was needed now was for somebody to give the flasks a good shake and life would crawl out. As time has shown, it wasn't nearly as simple. Despite half a century of further study, we are no nearer to synthesizing life today than we were in 1953, and much farther away from thinking we can. So some humility was found. And now there's reasons that we're talking about this stuff, right? And so the next thing from Bill Bryson that we'll read is about the formation of the human protein, collagen. So life requires proteins. And so how likely is it that a protein appeared during evolution? To make collagen, you need to arrange 1,055 amino acids in precisely the right sequence. But, and here's an obvious but crucial point, you don't make it. It makes itself, spontaneously, without direction, and this is where the unlikelihoods come in. The chances of a 1,055 sequence molecule like collagen spontaneously self-assembling are, frankly, nil. It just isn't going to happen. To grasp what a long shot its existence is, visualize a standard Las Vegas slot machine, but broaden greatly, to about 27 meters to be precise, to accommodate the 1,055 spinning wheels instead of the usual 3 or 4, and with 20 symbols on each wheel, one for each common amino acid. How long would you have to pull the handle before all 1,055 symbols came up in the right order? Effectively, forever. So when we start looking at the laws of probability, then anybody can look at the universe and say it's miraculous, but you can look at it scientifically, mathematically, and come up with an idea of how miraculous it is. So anyway, somehow proteins assemble themselves and get injected with life, whatever that is, and we have a living cell. So the final quote from Bill is concerning what an amazing thing a cell is. Every cell in nature is a thing of wonder. Even the simplest are far beyond the limits of human ingenuity. To build the most basic yeast cell, for example, you would have to miniaturize about the same number of components as are found in a Boeing 777 jetliner and fit them into a sphere just 0.5 microns across. Then somehow you would have to persuade that sphere to reproduce. He goes on to say, if you could visit a human cell, you wouldn't like it. Blown up to a scale at which atoms were about the size of peas, a cell itself would be a sphere approximately half a mile across. Within it, millions upon millions of objects, some the size of basketballs, others the size of cars, would whiz about like bullets. There wouldn't be a place you could stand without being pummeled and ripped thousands of times every second from every direction. The proteins are especially lively, spinning, pulsating, and flying into each other up to 1 billion times a second. All lead existences that are inconceivably frenzied. So it's a mad world inside a cell, And in the very first cell, it was a mad world. So carrying on with more details on levels of being, we've established that that life beginning at all is highly improbable, and I hope you feel that way. So the question is, how could it simply appear? How could life just start? We gave the example in the first video of Bill Gates talking about DNA being a program, and therefore in the very first cell there was DNA, but this program needed to have a programmer. So this is the point I'm seeking to establish here. Okay, so Albert Einstein looked at the universe, and I think I've already used this in the first video, and he said, "My religion consists of a humble admiration of the illimitable superior spirit who reveals himself in the slight details we are able to perceive with our frail and feeble mind." So the universe is shouting that there's a creator. I think our problem is that we have imagined what the creator is and decided that's a bit iffy. We're not going to believe in that thing. But set that aside, set previous notions aside, and just ask the question, was it necessary to have a creator implement DNA or the evolution, of DNA, or to create life and proteins and whatever else? And the answer is obviously yes. We haven't talked about the nature of the creator, but it's fairly clear, I think, that there was a creator. So we can see in this illustration the different levels of being we were just talking about. It's a farmer outstanding in his field, as they say. And so we look at this field, and it's a rocky field, and so it's only good for grazing. So we see the rocks, which are obviously the mineral level, and then we have the vegetable level represented by the tree and also the grass, and then we have the animal level represented by the bull, and then we have the poor farmer being chased out of his field by the bull. And so what's going on is everything is behaving according to its level. The bull in particular has seen the farmer in the field, and he says, "Hey, that's just another animal as far as the bull is concerned." And so he decides that the farmer doesn't belong in the field, and he chases him away. And having no concept of the fact that the farmer is a superior being and actually has the power of life and death over the bull, that doesn't stop the bull at all from chasing the farmer away. The farmer is kind of bemused, like this may have happened before, I don't know. So the point is that each level can't understand the levels above it. The bull has no way of understanding what it means to be the farmer, to have the power of abstract thought and the ability to operate against the laws of nature. So that's one thing. Each level can't understand the level above it, and never will. And also, the higher levels tend to dominate the lower levels. So the bull, for example, can just eat the grass whenever he wants, and the grass has nothing to say about it. And so the tree maybe can thrust its roots into the ground and possibly even break the rocks. So the vegetable level dominates the mineral level. The animal level dominates the vegetable level. And then not evident in this picture is the fact that the human level dominates the animal level. So you look at this and you say, okay, that kind of makes sense. Then the question that kind of jumps out is, are there levels above the farmer? Is there a level above the farmer? And as human beings, we say, oh, of course not. We're in charge of this planet and we can do whatever we want. But I would put to you that it is entirely reasonable that there might be levels above us, and of course they would dominate us, and we would have limited understanding of things that are above us. So I'll carry that analogy forward later on. So one of the obvious levels of being above us, besides the farmer and his visitor, is a creator, and all of the great early scientists didn't even think about that. It was obvious to them, as it is obvious to most all native cultures, that there's a creative force out there in the universe. But fairly recently in science, some scientists have struggled mightily to invent a scenario where we don't need to refer to a creator. They are in the process of failing that attempt, So anyway, that group of scientists go under the category of scientific atheists, which turns out to be an oxymoron, words that contradict each other. So we've already thought about how the probability of life existing at all is zero, or something very close to zero. And the only straw that the scientific atheists are grasping is the multiverse theory, which says that, first of all, they believe that order is improbable. As a matter of fact, there's a law, of thermodynamics, which I may talk a bit about later, that scientists believe it's a law, and it says that order is improbable. So now you look out on the universe and you say, oh, from an explosion we have all this order, plus life, plus consciousness, plus the capability of abstract thought, so that's just highly, highly improbable. Well, the way that the scientific atheists explain that away is they say, oh, but there's a lot of universes, there's multiverses out there, and one of them is bound to be ordered. If you have enough multiverses out there, they'll be ordered, So that theory, the multiverse theory, is now well discredited, even though it's very popular in the movies, of course. Primarily because it can't be tested, and that's a requirement of a theory, is that it be testable. Otherwise, it's just a passing thought, And this great physicist Neil Turok says, if Einstein had ever come across the multiverse theory way back when, he would see immediately that it wasn't testable. And he would say to these other physicists, come on, guys, get yourself a real theory. So I love that. So anyway, there's published papers by folks in the intelligent design community, scientific papers, that make the argument that there is some kind of creator out there. It's a very easy argument to make. Things get muddy when you start talking about the nature of the creator. So anyway, there's a particular book, The Return of the God Hypothesis by Stephen Meyer, which is very persuasive, that there's a creator out there. A lot of you don't need to be persuaded of this, but I'm saying that if you're scientifically minded, you should believe in a creator. And a lot of scientists do. And so the scientific atheists are on the back foot. We talked about Bill Gates and his view of DNA, that it's a program, and so there has to be a programmer. And the real question is, from a scientific point of view, which point of view is more probable? And by far the more probable theory is the idea that there's an intelligent designer out there. So that's good. I also might mention creationism, which I don't view as, it doesn't have a place in the sort of the scientific consideration of things, primarily because the fossil record shows that we have, that physical evolution has occurred over long periods of time, not over a few thousand years. So finally, just to give a simple example, and one that maybe resonates with folks better, is what I'll call the story of friend A and friend B. So friend A believed in a creator and friend B did not, but they were good friends and they got together every week for a cup of tea. And they would sometimes end up discussing this. So this time the cup of tea was going to be at friend A's house. And so she determined what she was going to do is go out into her workshop and build a little model of the solar system. So it had little planets, connected with gears and pulleys revolving around a sun, and then that was hooked up to a little electric motor. And so it was quite a neat little piece of technical sculpture, dynamic sculpture. So the time came for the friend to visit, for friend B to visit, and friend A put her creation on the coffee table and went into the kitchen to get the tea and scones ready or whatever. And the doorbell rang, and she just yelled to this guy to come in. So friend B came in, and she said, "I'm almost ready. Just go into the living room." So he goes into the living room, and there he sees this solar system, and says, "Oh, wow, what's that?" And she says, "What's what? What are you talking about?" And it says, "There on the coffee table, it's it's a model of the solar system. It's really neat. Where did it come from?" And she says, I don't know. It just appeared there. I looked in the living room, there it was." And he said, "That can't be true. You have this wonderful thing. It had to come from somewhere. It had to be made by someone. Did you make it?" And friend B says, "Yes, it has a creator." So I think that's a great story. So we have levels above us, and at least I think we do. Certainly the creator is above us, because in the same way that a painter is more than a painting, but he has made a painting. So we have at least a creator as a level of being above us that we will never fully understand, because we're We're part of the creation. We're not the creator. But I think there are other levels above us too, such as the founders of the world's great religions. The visitor to the farm, might have been Christ or Muhammad, or, these humble souls who appear, and their powers become evident over time because they're still influencing humanity thousands of years after they appeared. And I'll probably talk more about that as well. So the question is, what has been the role of religion, which has come to us in that way? Sometimes, I'll talk about that. So the logical question is, okay, so there are levels above us. How can we understand them? And the short answer is we can't. However, we do get some hints from religion, at least enough to know that they exist, these levels. So I have a friend who, religion has a bad name, because it's been overlaid with human stuff, and its original sort of transforming power has been diluted and whatever else, because great civilizations have been built on religion. This is historical fact. And people have been transformed, from, I always look at Islam because there were these barbaric tribes in Arabia that did things like they would bury their female children alive because they were undesirable, barbaric behavior. And then within a few centuries after Muhammad shows up, they're sending out expeditions around the world for the sole purpose of gathering knowledge, scientific knowledge. And, the European nations were living in squalor while the Islamic world had paved streets and street lights and sewers. So Islam transformed the Islamic world from something that was pretty barbaric into something that was world-leading in terms of civilization. So anyway, religion is not all bad. This is my point. And a friend of mine, as I said in the first video, gave me this simple definition of religion, what it is and what it is not. What it is what came out of the mouth of Christ, or what came out of the mouth of Buddha, or what came out of the mouth of Baha'u'llah. So there's only a few major religions out there, though there probably have been more over history, going back millennia. But anyway, definition of religion is what came out of the mouth of Christ, and not what somebody decided what Christ said meant. Then things, it's great to think about these things, but these interpretations of religion have been human inventions, and some of the decisions that have been made have been human decisions done in the name of religion. So I say that's our best attempt at putting our shape on religion, but religion is what came out of the mouth of Christ. And so now we've reached a stage where we have new science, which is very full of itself, and is making a lot of pronouncements. And new science is evolving rapidly through this wonderful method, the scientific method, where theories are proposed, they're tested and retested, and gradually understandings evolve, and you come up with really good theories, So the scientific method is to be admired. However, the resulting science has evolved rapidly. Only a century or two ago, Newtonian physics was the thing. It was a great way to describe the physical world. Then Einstein came along with relativity, and whoops, all that stuff from Newtonian physics, it wasn't complete. It needed some help, So the point is that new science is advancing rapidly. However, any understandings in new science are subject to modification as time goes by. Meanwhile, old religion is sort of like, a bunch of men got together in the Middle Ages and decided that this saying of Christ meant that. And that's the way it's been ever since. It's never changed, Well, guess what? Old religion there was no such thing as science in those days, right? Science is not mentioned in the Quran. It's not mentioned in the Bible. And science is a new thing. So old religion, if it wasn't logical, well, that was okay. People didn't think logically back then. They just proposed, ideas, and if enough people bought in, that was truth, So old religion is easily discredited, and new science, because it thinks, just like an adolescent child, thinks it knows a lot, is very happy to discredit old religion. So we have this conflict between two immature points of view, when in fact truth is truth, and over time the truth will out, as they say, whether it's religious truth or scientific truth. So what I propose is that in the past, humanity was brought religion by these remarkable beings with a capital B, whether it was Buddha or Krishna or Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, Christ. And so each one founded a new religion that had a transforming effect on humanity in their areas. And then over time, human beings got their hands on it, and it suffered. Its purity was diluted, let's say, and a lot of other stuff came into it. It's kind of like when you have a glass of pure water and then something gets poured into it that it's still mostly water, but it's polluted, and you probably wouldn't want to drink it depending on what the added ingredient is. So this happens over time, number one. Number two, social conditions change, and some of the social laws of religion need to be modified, and therefore religion is renewed, somewhere else in the world or somewhere nearby. And Christ comes, and he never dismissed the laws of Moses. We still have the Ten Commandments, But he said a few other things, some of which were quite controversial, like no divorce, more or less, except under special circumstances. Well, he was a level of being above us. You just have to read the Bible and you realize that this is the case. He was supernatural. He was something above the human level. And he had the authority to say whatever he wanted to say because he knew stuff that we don't know, so it wasn't up for debate. And but then meanwhile, since he came, Christianity has had its problems, for lack of a better word. But that doesn't alter the fact that Christianity has been a positive influence on the world. But then Islam came, and offered new ideas, additional ideas. So the spiritual truths remain the same. There's a golden rule in every religion. In the book, I have, in the appendices, I show the same teaching concerning service in religion, and each religion sounds the same. Well, that's because they're all from the same source. We've managed to, modify or change some of these teachings beyond their original intent, and therefore a new religion is brought, and this has continues to happen. So that's my theory of religion. It can seem pretty ridiculous, but there's historical reasons for it. Human beings got their hands on it, and while the core teachings are still wonderful and valid, then there's sort of the human invented teachings that need to be weeded out, So we go back to our farmer, and I've already suggested that this being appears on the farm, and a being that is superhuman, is able to. These messengers from God, they know everything, and I can just hear people saying, "Oh, I don't believe that." Well, you don't have to. You have free will. You can absolutely believe whatever you want. But if you investigate it, you will discover that these beings had superhuman knowledge. Well, the farmer didn't investigate. He was just feeling upset that he'd been chased out of his field again, and so he didn't want to deal with this loving, all-knowing being that arrived at his doorstep, and so he chased him away. And that's what we tend to do when a new religion comes. The founders are severely mistreated, sometimes killed, and the proof of their divinity, that they're a higher level than us, is that they appear and we mistreat them. But their messages, in spite of the fact that these beings have no political sway, have no material means, and are very unlikely to succeed, they do succeed. So that's what happened to our farmer, and it can happen to us. So we have to be on our toes, right? So we've made a case for levels of being higher than us, and they communicate to us through religion, which, has transformed civilizations in the past, and we can have the hope that it will continue to happen because it has been a repeatable phenomenon in human history. So now we're going to move from that and start talking about life after death. So if you think about a child, and this is all background information that we will then use when we finally get around to talking about the purpose of life. So a child's in the womb, and it's growing physically, and it's in very good conditions for its physical development. It does not and cannot understand its next life. It doesn't even know that the next life is coming. It's in there. It's warm. It's got everything it needs. And who knows, maybe it doesn't really want to move on, But its next life is there. Matter of fact, its next life is that far away. The wall of the mother's tummy is separating the child from the next life, of which it has no clue except for hearing random noises, muffled noises, of music and people talking. And so these are the hints it gets that there's a next life. So, and yet this vast world awaits. A vast world. Not only that, there's also all kinds of people that know that the child is coming. They're all excited. They can't wait to love the child and help it on its journey through its next life, through life. So that's great. And so hopefully that's the case with us when we move on from this life, when we're born into whatever comes next. Which, of course, we have no idea, what that life can be like. We're given some words from books about near-death experiences and also from religious texts that speak glowingly of the next life. And so I have a couple of quotes from some books, and I recommend that when you start reading these books about folks who've had near-death experiences, they have a hard time explaining themselves. Why? Because just like this life can't be explained to a child in the womb, the next life, there's just really no form of words to describe what it's like. So these people had a near-death experience and they come back. And here's a quote from Life After Life by Raymond Moody. So this guy says, "I had the feeling that there were people around me, and I could feel their presence and could feel them moving, though I could never see anyone." He's struggling with the words here. "Every now and then I would talk with one of them, but I couldn't see them. And whenever I wondered what was going on, I would always get a thought back from one of them, that everything was all right, that I was dying, but would be fine." So I think that's lovely. It's very encouraging. And it supports the idea that we really can't understand, what's coming next. But guess what? It's a good thing. And then I mentioned the book Proof of Heaven by Ibn Alexander, who's a prominent brain surgeon, like consultant to the president, kind of prominent. And he had no interest in religion particularly, and he had a near-death experience. And so he describes his experience in similar fumbling words, but he had all the medical data, that he could review after he came back. And he is 100% sure that this is not these experiences are not the last gasp of a dying organ. These are real. These are things that really happened. And so he's convinced that there's a life after death. Then finally, I'll just mention my mom. A lot of people have had, experiences with people who have passed on. And my mom had some fairly typical experiences. She died at home and comfortably in her bed, and it was a special experience. And she was a very intelligent lady and was, I'll say, a bit skeptical about things, even though she had, religious beliefs. And so one morning she says to me that, I saw Bill Demers, but Bill's dead. How could I have seen Bill? And she always had a great sense of humor, and she would kind of be smiling like, this seems unlikely, but I guess it really happened, And so we would talk about these things. And I remember one conversation we had where I said, "Mom, you're like a chick in the egg, and your egg is cracking, and you can kind of see stuff out, through the cracks. My egg is still pretty good, so I haven't a clue about the outside, what's coming next. And so whenever you see something, you have to tell me all about it because I'm really curious." So we really had a nice last month or so. So obviously religious teachings tell us stuff about life after death and talk about heaven, and they tend to put things in binary ways, as I've mentioned in the past. There's heaven, there's hell. You make it to heaven or you go to hell. And but that's something you would say to a child. You just say, "Here's the story. be a good person. You make it to heaven, and you're good. You don't say, well, you need to be as honest as possible, to have done as many good things as possible, because the degree to which you achieve that will affect your condition in the next life, which I think is the reality of the situation. So anyway, we conclude that it's entirely possible and likely that there's a next life of which we are ignorant, and we won't understand it until we get there. So to summarize the second chapter of the book, which is just background information, which will be useful when we talk about meaning and purpose in life in subsequent videos, subsequent chapters. We've discussed that there are different levels of being in the world around us: mineral, plant, animal, human. We have a limited understanding of the properties which separate the different levels of being, those being life, consciousness, and the capacity for abstract thinking. And we can't replicate these things, we just know they exist. So, respect to the Creator. It is logical that there could be levels of being above us that we cannot comprehend or fully appreciate. It's logical. As adolescents, we don't want to think that there's stuff we can't know. The most probable explanation for creation is a creator, the author of the universe. The most probable other theories are extremely improbable. So further conclusions we have reached is that the purpose of any creation is known by its creator. Think of friend A and friend B. She knew exactly what she was doing to create the solar system model. We see that religion is a repeatable phenomenon in human history, and seems to include information from our Creator. It's up to us, because we've been gifted free will, to determine whether this is true or not. I'm not, forcing you to believe anything. But the fact that religion is repeatable is actually a scientific phenomenon. So if experiments are repeatable in science, then that's good. They have to be repeatable to be viewed as good science. So anyway, religion is a repeatable phenomenon in human history, and has had this same transforming effect. Although it doesn't happen very often. New religion only occurs every 1,000 years or so. So therefore, religious teachings should be considered in our quest for meaning in life. They, among other things, contain information of why we're here and how we should conduct our lives. And so, when all else fails, read the instructions. And another thing we've proposed, that it's likely that we go on in some fashion after we die to places we can only dimly visualize in this life, in the same way the child in the womb can only dimly visualize what's coming next based on muffled noises. So that's background information. That's in chapter 2, and that's the end of that. But then next, we're going to move into another background information chapter, which I've entitled Tracing Human Development. So where where have we been as a race? And on that basis, we might come up with some ideas of where we're going. And this will be useful when we get around to discussing purpose in life.